Alright, hi guys, here we are again together for yet another exciting poem from the Tao Te Ching. Today, or whenever you're watching this, I thought we'd go over poem 15. Are you ready to go on an adventure of the mind? Alright, so our next group of poems that we're doing this week is 11 through 20. And I've chosen two, last week. Well, I didn't do two last week because I talked too long about the other one. But I've chosen two for this week to go over, and so 15 is one of them. Of course, there's lots of very thematic things in all of those 10 poems. But 15 deals with some important images and themes that I think, play out further in the book. That'd be good to think about. So, here we go. There are two sections to 15. The first section is rather long. I will read all of it, and then I'll stop there before we get to the end, and then go back through that first section, okay? So if you have your book with you, go ahead and read along if you'd like, and get ready to make annotations and such. Here we go, number 15. The ancients were subtle, mysterious, profound, responsive. The depth of their knowledge is unfathomable. Because it is unfathomable, all we can do is describe their appearance. Watchful, as though crossing a winter stream. Alert, like people aware of danger. Courteous, like visiting guests. Yielding, like ice about to melt. Simple, like uncarved blocks of wood. Hollow, like caves. Opaque, like muddy pools. So we start off with a description of a bunch of people that the book describes as the ancients. Now this is an interesting thing to think about because this book, for us, is 2,500 years old. And so for the person who wrote this book, well, how old are the ancients that they're speaking of? Does this mean ancient in terms of just someone who's very old, yet still alive? Or does this mean ancient in terms of like someone who lived thousands and thousands of years ago? But you'll notice that these ancients, he does, prescribes particular attributes. So they're subtle, they're mysterious, profound, and responsive. The depth of their knowledge is unfathomable. Now, unfathomable simply means something that just can't be known. It is beyond knowledge. So the depth of their knowledge is unfathomable. Because it is unfathomable, all we can do is describe their appearance. So I'd like to suggest that these ancients that Lao Tzu is talking about is very comparable to the Tao itself. The Tao is beyond knowledge. The named Tao is beyond knowledge. The unnamed Tao is definitely beyond knowledge. And so like the ancients, the Tao is beyond knowledge. The depth of the Tao is unfathomable. So, just like the ancients, substitute like the Tao. Because the Tao is unfathomable, all we can do is describe the appearance. So again, we get to this idea that there is an actual thing, and then that is beyond our knowledge, and then there's the thing that we know. And we've begun to name those things and give attributes to those things. I talked about this in an earlier video, but I can't remember which one. So just like the Tao, Lao Tzu ascribes attributes to these ancients in order to be able to give them a type of form, because without it they are beyond form. And so we as humans have to have some type of form here between heaven and earth where we exist. So all we can do is describe their appearance. When you think about someone like perhaps that you love, right? Romantically love. The age-old question we've talked about many times in class. Well, why do you love that person? That's beyond description. It is unfathomable. You can talk about attributes, just like the attributes of these ancients. You can point towards things that show that you love them, or actions that take place that, one would associate with loving someone in a romantic way. Again, we've talked about this in class, whether that's kissing or the very sweet words you say, words that are certainly reserved only for a very special person, things of that nature. So the Tao is unfathomable, just like romantic love for another person is unfathomable. By the way, I think love for any person, whether it's familial love, brotherly love, friendship love, is all unfathomable as well. So let's look at the descriptions that Lao Tzu gives us of these ancients. Watchful, as though crossing a winter stream. Now, we don't have a lot of experience here in Northwest Houston of what crossing a winter stream is like. For us, crossing a winter stream would just be cold or even cool water. Whereas crossing a winter stream in China, likely, depending on where you're at in China, of course, would be that of a frozen stream. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever seen a frozen stream, but you have likely heard of it, or seen it in movies, and so you understand by description like what a winter stream is. It's that the top is frozen, yet underneath the ice, underneath the frozen top, the water is still flowing. And did you guys catch? Here's George. Hi, George. Is it George? Hey, buddy. Okay, he's gone. So a winter stream, the ice is usually frozen enough that you could walk across it. However, you do want to be watchful. You do want to be mindful of that. You don't want to step onto an ice that is too thin, and for obvious reasons. So watchful, as though crossing a winter stream. Alert, like people aware of danger. I'm sure you've been in a situation where you have felt unsafe. Whether that unsafe feeling was justified or not is another matter, but when you feel unsafe, your senses are heightened, right? So, like people aware of danger. Courteous, like a visiting guest. You would hope that a guest would be courteous. Yielding, like ice about to melt. Now, ice about to melt, again, kind of think more naturally, not like, the ice in your drink that you got from Whataburger or something, but ice, like on a lake or a river or even a puddle. When ice is just about to melt, it becomes soft. It goes from being hard to being soft. And so it is yielding, like ice about to melt. Simple, like an uncarved block of wood. We are going to talk more about the uncarved block of wood in a later poem. It is an incredibly significant image in the Tao Te Ching. This is the first time it's brought up, and it's not very elaborated on, so I don't want to elaborate on it right now, but we will talk more about it. But an uncarved block of wood, of course, looks like nothing. It's just except a block of wood. It has not been formed into any other shape yet. And then hollow like caves. Another translation, the Pine translation, says open like a valley. And then opaque, like muddy pools. Now, certainly here in Northwest Houston, we're familiar with muddy pools. There are plenty of them. Puddles, you've seen them all over the place, whether it's the drainage ditch that just hasn't drained yet, or puddles in your yard, or in a parking lot, or whatever. We know that a muddy pool, like there's sediment in that water, that is the mud, that is the dirt, and it has yet to settle, and so that muddy pool is murky and you cannot see through it. Therefore, very similar to the ancients. They're that mysterious, they're opaque, like a muddy pool. Okay, let's get on to the second part of the poem. Who can wait quietly while the mud settles? Who can remain still until the moment of action? Observers of the Tao do not seek fulfillment. Not seeking fulfillment, they are not swayed by desire for change. This is actually probably the most significant portion of the poem, these last 4 lines. So let's focus on the first 2 of this last stanza. Who can wait quietly while the mud settles? Who can remain still until the moment of action? So if you think about, like maybe a jar of water that has some dirt in it, you can shake up that jar of water and it will eventually, after time, that is George moving the tripod. Come here, George. Come here, George. So you take that jar and you shake it, and of course the water becomes cloudy. Now, there is no way that you can clear up the water in that jar except by simply waiting. Waiting for the dirt or the mud to settle. So we see this theme that runs throughout the Tao Te Ching, is that sometimes there are things that you have no control over, and the only way to allow them to resolve themselves is to just simply wait and be still. There's no way you can get the mud to settle in the pool without just simply waiting. That is the only solution. Right, George? So I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you've tried really, really hard to solve a problem and the solution just doesn't present itself, no matter how hard. I often run into, there's all kinds of problems in life, but a similar one for me is dealing with students' schedules. Students' schedules can be notoriously difficult to work out, and sometimes you can spend 2 or 3 weeks on it and still a solution does not present itself, no matter how hard you tried. And it's when I hit that point where I'm like, you know what? And you've probably heard this type of advice before with big problems. You just need to step back. You just need to step back from the problem and let it be for a little while. Let it take the course that it needs to take. Oftentimes in trying to come to a solution with student schedules is dependent on other people for that solution, whether that's other teachers, students, what have you, administration. That the problem gets to a point where finally a person makes a move because they have been moved to make that move. So this is one of the tenets of Taoism, which is to just simply be still and wait until the moment of action. There will be a moment when that action is ready to take place, that the answer will present itself. And then finally we get to these last two lines. The observers of the Tao do not seek fulfillment. Not seeking fulfillment, they are not swayed by desire for change. So observers of the Tao, I'm going to say that once again we are talking about the wise or the sage. It doesn't use that particular language, but an observer of the Tao would be someone who is a practitioner or a follower of the Tao, right? So we might assume that this could be a sage or one of the wise that it talks about. So it says, observers of the Tao do not seek fulfillment. Again, that goes back to the ego, right? So the ego wants us to seek fulfillment of some kind, one way or the other. And it is recommended here that the wise, they don't seek fulfillment. So the next line, by not seeking fulfillment, they are not swayed by desire for change. So it's kind of like saying, one of the reasons that we get so worked up about decisions when we get into a fit about them, because things aren't going our way with that particular decision, we can't find the answer that we want. There's an answer out there, it just may not be the answer that we want. And so by not seeking that fulfillment, by not seeking that desire of what we want the answer to result itself in, like by forcing it, by not being swayed by that desire for that, well, they find greater peace. Another line, or another translation says for that last line, not seeking fulfillment, they're not swayed by desire, but welcome all things. Again, an example of accepting what is. There is one other translation I do want to bring up with these last two lines. Comes from the Chin translation. The last two lines of the Chin translation says this: those who keep this Tao do not want to be fulfilled to the full. Because they are not full, they can renew themselves before being worn out. Now that's a little bit of a different take on it, and it kind of goes back to the opening line of Poem 9, so if you want to flip to there real quick, because we didn't go over that one, but it does have a good idea in it. The very first line of Poem 9 says, better stop short than fill to the brim. That's talking about a cup, right? Filling to the brim of something. We all know if you've ever poured a glass of something to drink and then you're going to walk into the living room with it, if you filled that cup too full, you're going to spill parts of it as you're walking. That's just the way it goes. So it's best not to fill that cup to the brim. It's best not to, if you translate this to your life, best not to fill your life up to the brim. And so this Chin translation, those who keep this Tao do not want to be filled to the full. It's the same thing as the opening line of Poem 9. Not wanting to be filled to the full is not wanting to be filled to the brim. And then because they are not full, in other words, because they're not filled to the brim, they can renew themselves before being worn out. They can renew themselves before being worn out. You know, when we run into a problem, we're just banging our heads against the wall trying to come up with a solution for it, and we can't. We wear ourselves out. We wear ourselves out emotionally, we wear ourselves out sometimes even physically with that because of the emotional toll of it. But by not filling to the top, by not chasing that question and trying to find its answer against what seems to be the natural way, you know, you don't wear yourself out and you become renewed. In other words, refreshed. So that is poem 15. I think it has some very good ideas in terms of the overall scope of what the Tao Te Ching is and what it advocates for, which a lot of it in this case, of course, is to accept what is and be still and allow things to take their natural course. The answer will present itself. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you wherever I see you. Bye. So just like the Tao, so again, once again. So we start off with another week or two of this, if I don't get to a barber, my hair is going to start looking real silly.